Hello, welcome to Werks. This is a coffee from my favorite local coffee shop, and today we're going to be making a display case for their baked goods. I'll start by going over to the chop saw and cutting the boards to rough length. Once that's done, I can go over to the jointer and mill the face of each board. For the wider boards, I removed the guard of my jointer. I did not need to remove the rabbiting edge. All I have to do is remove that red piece, but you can remove the whole thing too, and you can see it takes off most of the board, and that little extra bit hanging off at the end, I can just send through the planer with a sacrificial board underneath it. You'll see what I mean in a minute here. Now with the planer set up here, I'll put a piece of plywood in that does not go the full width across. That little ledge from the jointer can sit on the plywood, and then I can run the first pass through to flatten the entire board, and from there I can run everything else through. And then it's back to the jointer to edge joint each board. From there I'll go to the table saw and begin to rip these pieces down. I need a lot of thin strips for this job. You'll see I marked the ends of the boards here so I don't get confused as to which board is supposed to get ripped to which width. Now I'll cut everything to its final length on my crosscut sled before ripping it down to length. That way I know that all the pieces are exactly the same length. For the really long pieces, I'll use the chop saw to cut them to length. The way this thing is built, it's almost like a bunch of picture frames that come together and make sort of a big wooden fish tank. So the top piece I mitered all the corners. The rest of them I didn't because I didn't think it would be quite as strong, but I wanted the top to look really nice. With the pieces cut out, I'll use the domino joiner to cut the dominoes so I can hold everything together. I pretty much used dominoes throughout this entire piece. This seemed like the best option to hold this whole thing together with so many little pieces. I'm going to be using these cool little corner clamping brackets. I saw these on 4Eyes Furniture, so I decided to make a couple of my own, and they're really handy. They just take a lot of clamps to glue something together. But you'll see here it makes gluing a big miter joint, especially something like a picture frame, it makes gluing something like that together super easy. I had to get a little bit creative with the way I clamped this whole piece together because I didn't have any clamps long enough for the whole thing, but with the middle support I was able to clamp to that and reach with my longer clamps to the middle. So I accidentally ordered this glass the wrong size. I need to remove 3/4 of an inch of glass, so I'm going to do my best to do that. Usually cutting a thin strip of glass off the end is pretty tricky, but I was able to score it and just make a lot of light little taps, and it was able to crack the glass enough and it actually worked out pretty well. Not bad. With all the frames made, I was able to go over to the router table and route the groove along the inside for the glass to sit in. For the bigger piece, I had to use the handheld router just because it was too big to fit through my router table in my little shop. So the case has two large glass shelves, and I didn't want to have any wood frames underneath them. I thought that would look a little bit funny, so I ended up just using shelf pins, and I used them pretty much everywhere I could. There's a couple middle supports so that the glass is supported in the middle and on the ends. Here I'm just cutting out a piece of plywood for the bottom. I use this thumbtack trick where you can measure to the tack and set the track right up against it, and it works really well to get accurate cuts with your track saw. Even with that trick, I still like to run the plywood through the table saw after to get it to its final width. And then I can route a groove along the bottom of the frames. This is just making a recess for the plywood to sit in. I had to make an additional support for the middle of the case to support the glass in the middle, and I'm using this little scrap of wenge here just as an accent, just to add a little bit of extra flair to the case. Sometimes before I glue up, I'll put some wax on my bench just so the glue doesn't stick and it comes off easy after it dries. Now that everything is glued together, I can sand everything out and make it nice and smooth. And then I'll ease all the edges over just with a little hand sanding. So now I can route the groove around the top piece for the glass. Looking back, I'm honestly not sure why I didn't do this when I routed all the other ones.
Huh?
So I wanted to make the top removable so you could get the glass shelves out if you ever needed to, or God forbid one breaks, they could be replaced. So all I'm really doing here is just drilling some strips so that I can screw in the top. Here's a better look of how the top screws to the rest of the case, and here I'll just mark out the holes so that I can drill them. To hold the glass in, I made a bunch of 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch strips, and here I'm just ripping them all out on the table saw. I'm going to be using these little brass nails to nail in the strips for the glass. And what I've done here is I'm going to just pre-drill the holes so the nail just slips right through there. So I made this little jig, very simple. I just cut a little dado right down the middle and drilled a 1/16 inch hole. That makes drilling these holes super easy, and I can do it really fast and they'll all be in the exact same place. Some of the longer ones I'll put some additional holes in the middle. Now I'll give the piece the stamp of approval. Moving on to finish, I'm using lacquer for this project. That is my go-to finish. It just works really well and I love how fast it dries. So typically I'll spray 3 coats and sand in between. You don't technically have to sand in between lacquer because it does burn into the coat before, but I find you get a much smoother finish sanding in between, and I use 400 grit in between each coat. And then after the last coat, I'll sand it out with 400 and just go over with paste wax. And that really smooths everything out, gives it a nice sheen. Sometimes you get a little white residue with that, but you just have to come back and buff it out. Alright, so at this point I'm ready to put the glass in, but the most important step that you have to do right before you put the glass is go down to your local coffee shop and make sure you get an extra coffee, and then you'll be good to go from there. I like to take some clear silicone and just run a light bead down the corner. That just keeps the glass from rattling around or anything. It keeps it from moving anywhere. So now with the glass in all the sides and in the front, I will install the shelves. Like I said, these just sit on some shelf pins, and then with that I can put the top on. I used Rockler's sliding glass door kit for the doors. I wasn't overly impressed with this kit. The final results were great, but it was kind of a pain to install. There was nothing pre-drilled in the track, which was a little bit annoying. But other than that, it went pretty well. Also, installing the actual glass into the track was kind of difficult. I had this rubber gasket material that was supposed to go the whole width. It was just way too tight, so I ended up just putting it in the corners. And I still felt like I really had to put a lot of pressure on the glass to get it to fit in there. But once it was installed, the kit was great. It was just a little bit difficult to install, and there wasn't much out there on how to do it properly. Alright, this thing is done. Thank you for watching. Friendly reminder to support your local coffee shops because they are what keeps people like me going. Here are some final pictures of the case installed. If you are ever in the Connecticut area, you should totally go check out the Loaded Goat. This is my favorite coffee company. I go here all the time. The owners are really nice people, and the coffee's great. Overall, it's just an awesome experience, so would highly recommend. And thanks for watching.